Welcome to Birken Forest Monastery's live stream. I'm Ajahn Sona. Let's proceed with the first question, Pia.
Ajahn, our first question today is from the live stream from John. Hello, Ajahn. I am 29, the age where you and the Buddha made the decision to go forth. Is it enough of an aspiration to develop jhana and try my best to enter it at the time of death?
Is that the full question? Well, yeah, it is interesting about this age of 29. It would be interesting to go over in history all kinds of... it might be different for men than women as well, like certain ages... 29, 28, 29, 30, that age. What was, how old was Jesus?
29.
29. When he went off to the desert and so forth. So it's an interesting number that keeps coming up in various points of historical renunciate lives. Maybe it's basically when you're 29, you've been there, done that. Many people are fully accomplished. I mean, Einstein's theories were all worked out in his 20s. I think Newton as well had pretty well figured out the laws of the motion in the universe, etc. In his 20s. And so, whatever intelligence and perspicuity, look it up in the dictionary. Oh, Google it. That you have should be there. A certain amount of emotional intelligence is still to be developed. Notice that the Buddha went off at 29, but didn't become the Buddha until 35, so it was 6 years later. So he had the motivation to explore and did not know, and in fact made wrong choices. He fell in with the wrong crowd, some extreme asceticism, etc., which he hoped would lead to the resolution of his questions. So that's a maturity of judgment that he developed over that time. Now we're fortunate that the Buddha has gone through those explorations, saving us the need to do that. Same with, say, Einstein's relativity theories and so forth. Try to blunder through and work that out yourself. And very unlikely. So since somebody has forged the way already, then it's available to us. And even having it fully worked out and beautifully explained by the Buddha, it's still a daunting task to accomplish, to fulfill the path that the Buddha cleared for you. But 29, yes, is a typical age where people begin their serious existential inquiry. Now, your plan is to attain jhana, and then hopefully that you'll die with jhana, and that will help you in some ways. But yes, indeed, jhana is a noble aspiration. It's the 8th factor of the Eightfold Path, but it is not the conclusion of the path. It has very high, exquisite results in this life and beyond. By the way, dying in jhana is maybe not such a volitional activity. What happens is that if jhana is developed in life, So jhana is this samadhi, a type of concentration of exquisitely focused capacity of the mind. So one thing that is apparently lacking greatly in modern times is the inability to focus, this attention deficit syndrome, which is pretty universal. And the more we expose ourselves to, very brief and flitting kind of in entertainments, with the more our ability to focus over long term diminishes. So this jhana, this extremely focused clarity of mind, balanced focused clarity, is a supernormal condition. It's not supernatural, it's supernormal. It's above normal capacity. And if you can possibly develop, it's something to work towards for everybody, is to increase your capacity to sustain attention and focus. It will make you a better, happier, and more sane person. But if you manage to break through into these supernormal states of lucidity and clarity and balance, sanity in a sense, what they claim in the more analytical works, what's called the Abhidhamma and so forth, is that will tend to arise at the time of death, because it's such a very powerful, positive condition. At the time of death, that tends to overshadow other types of events in your life, and is the moment, the decisive moment, which determines the next life. And if that moment is determined by jhana, then you enter into a realm which is above the sensuous heavens. This really is an amazing piece of analytical work, which we find in the Abhidhamma. We find it in certain forms in the suttas as well. The analysis of the possibilities of consciousness in the universe is exquisitely worked out in Buddhism. 500 years before Christianity. When we look through historical religions, we find very basic, primitive descriptions of the possibilities of consciousness in the universe. When we look into Buddhism, especially the early schools of Buddhism, the Theravada and so forth, we find very, very highly developed maps of the conscious universe that are only primitively sketched out in even much later developments in religion. So there are the heavens, by the way, heaven was not discovered by Jesus. the immaculate, detailed voyages through the heavens are fully articulated 500 years before by the Buddha, and also more details and articulation is supplied by his advanced disciples later. So we have this level above the sensory heavens. So sensual heavens are more or less what people have ideas of what heavens would be like, exquisite, delightful places where the highest beauty that you can imagine is kind of fulfilled. But there are heavens beyond that, and these are called the samadhi heavens, or the jhanic heavens, the heavens of the rupa jhanas. And these are more or less subtle material kind of realms that are primarily pure contemplative processes. And they can't be described precisely in terms of sensory experiences. It's not about sights or sounds, smells, tastes, touches, or even in profound ideas. It's beyond that. It's a state of suspension of analytical thinking and the absence of the sensory experience, but is profoundly exquisite and extremely long-lived. So this is the sensory, the transcendence of the sensory heavens. By the way, if you want more information on this, there is a whole series about Buddhist cosmology on our YouTube channel, and in conversation with Ajahn Punadamo on this, we go into more detailed discussion on these, what we might call heavens above the sensory heavens. So dive deep into our YouTube channel and explore the 10 talks on cosmology. You'll see both Ajahn Punadamo and I going through the whole spectrum of Buddhist cosmology. We did that because it is so little known in the West. Lots of people are in some way identify as Buddhists, but there's a dearth of detailed information about the Buddhist cosmology, the whole sensory experience, the entire vision of the universe. We're familiar, mostly it's, at least until recently, it's been a Christian West, and we're very familiar with heaven and hell and these kind of things. So it is amazing to come across the Buddhist descriptions of this 500 years before in exquisite detail, and much that is not even basically articulated in Christianity or Judaism. Judaism is even more vague than the Christian view of things. By the way, you'll notice that maybe you won't notice, but if you're some form of Christian or have been some form of Christian, like Catholic versus Protestant, you will notice in the Catholic structure there's something called purgatory. There's something between heaven and hell, and in the Protestant reaction to this, at some point, 16th century. The Protestant Revolution, they got their hands on the Bible and decided that all this talk of purgatory was absent in the New Testament, at least. And they said that doesn't exist. There's only heaven and there's hell, and you go there for eternity, and there's nothing in between. And the Catholics have a whole range of different levels of heaven and different levels of purgatory and different levels of hell, and expressed in what's called the Divine Comedy by Dante, one of the great monuments of Western literature that you can still access and read. So something has been seen through a glass darkly by some Christian theologians in the West in history, but which is articulated brightly under a microscope in Buddhism many, many centuries earlier, 1,000 years earlier. So it's good to explore. If you want to read a little more about this, aside from the YouTube discussions with Ajahn Punadamo and myself, there is a kind of a summary of Abhidhamma called the Abhidhammata Sangaha, or a compendium of Abhidhamma by Bhikkhu Bodhi, and it's available online. So it's a few hundred pages long, and it kind of summarizes some of these details about cosmology. But your primary question is it a good idea to pursue jhana? Yes, go ahead, but it may lead you on. You may think that you're just going to satisfied with the Dhamma, or the Jhana rather, but you may find that it keeps unfolding, and that maybe at 35 that you want to push even further into the Dhamma as well. Okay, well, see, that's a rich source of information. Yeah.
Next question from the live stream is from Lynn in New York, United States. Lately, I'm struggling with this sense of being trapped physically in a space, subway, elevator, but also trapped in existence. Any tips for sitting with that fear?
Yeah, the fear is basic motivation, samvega, which is often described as kind of disenchantment or disappointment with existence. You're starting to feel the walls are closing in on you a bit. Where what we have is death in front of us, and there's no way out of this. You become conscious that you're in a situation. Everybody's walking around, laughing and smiling and telling jokes, or being very upset by this and that. But every now and then, what happens is that the realization of your mortality comes to the surface at some point. And you start to wonder, well, all of these little melodramas that we have in life, all end in death, whatever you do. And so what do we make of this? So that's the walls closing in on you. And sometimes, it's displaced as a sense of being trapped in elevators and subways and stuff like this. That's a displacement of your existential trap. We're in a trap. It's something to be fully brought into consciousness, but there's another balancing factor, and that is you can do this with a sense of ease, and so samvega is balanced by passaddhi. Passaddhi is one of the factors of enlightenment. It's passaddha, or serenity. The fact that we're in this existentially difficult situation of inevitable death and the inability to preserve anything in a transient universe is not best addressed through anxiety or fear. It's best addressed actually with a sense of serenity and clarity. So when you say sit with this feeling of samvega or disenchantment or being trapped, that's not how we should sit with it. We should actually overcome the emotional feeling, this gloomy and or anxious emotional feeling, and realize that our best thinking is done not with anxiety, but with lucidity and clarity. So because we're in this dire situation, every living being is in a dire, deathly situation, a situation of inevitable demise and death and loss. It's because of that you must be lucid and clear. The worse the situation is, the more clarity you need. In times of war and so forth, it's not the best strategy is not abject fear, it's abject courage. And if you can go beyond courage, by the way, there is something beyond courage, that is to be fearless, there's to be without fear, because your mind operates in a much better structure of reason and insight when fear is absent. But at the same time, we need to keep the realization, the philosophical, lucid reality and truth of our inevitable demise and the uncertainty of our lives have to be brought into full awareness, but without the accompanying anxiety and fear. So that's the strategy. So when you sit with this, it's not just, there's all kinds of misdirection about sitting with fear and sitting with sadness and all this kind of stuff. That is not the direction of the Buddha. You're not supposed to sit there mulling over your fears and embracing your sorrows and stuff like this. You'll see this kind of language all the time. It has nothing to do with the Buddhist strategy. This is some sort of importation of some schools of psychology of modern times. It's like embracing your sadness, sitting with your this, and being with it. Nonsense. It's just these are impediments to your clarity and lucidity. So we see the situation. This is kind of like going into emergency ward in a terrible accident. The surgeon, the doctor, has got to assess the damage. It can't be in denial about the damage. They have to be fully cognizant of the damage, but they don't have to be sad about it. They need to be, on the other hand, completely clinical and lucid about it in order to do something about this. So I hope there's no advice to surgeons about how you should embrace your sorrow about the broken, smashed person that just came out of a car accident. Please don't. Just see it as a broken anatomy. That's when you're at your best in order to fix these things, is when you're lucid, clear, and you're not swept away in some sort of sadness and anxious about a very real, painful situation. So lucidity and full philosophical awareness of the existential bleakness of the situation they go together, they're compatible. So this is my advice about that. Yeah, so let's go to the next question.
Next question in the live stream is from Wesleyan in Sweden. What is yoga really about?
Yoga, there is no aboutness about yoga. There is, it's a word, and it has common associations in other Indo-European languages. I want to reiterate something, that we don't want to isolate India from the rest of Asia, of actually Europe and Asia. And it's somehow separate, as if it was a separate country, but these are not countries. There are no countries in the early days, especially you go back to the Bronze Age, early in history. There's a flow, a migrating flow of peoples. They emerge from Africa. We can trace most of our present-day population back to a period in Africa about 60,000 years ago, when there's an out-of-Africa emergence. And this is done through genetic studies and archaeological studies. We see a spill out of Africa, and it moves into Europe, the steppes of Russia, of what is now Russia. It goes to India, goes right down to Australia, etc. And these are all, it's just a blank canvas, a mist of cloud that sweeps across what we would call Asia, the entire continent. And languages and genetics and intermixing of ideas and cosmological ideas, religious ideas, and scientific ideas are all intermixed and spill over into each other. This word, the word yoke that we have in English, especially old, like medieval English, you put a yoke on an oxen and so forth, is very similar to this yoga, this word yoga. It's kind of harnessing yourself to an idea. So yoga, in modern times, there are all kinds of schools that come out of the Indian tradition or sometimes are overlaid back into so-called India. India is not some sort of another planet. It's interpenetrated with Persian and all kinds of other migrations. And so these ideas, what happens in modern times is this kind of, I don't know, a mystical invention of certain kinds of history. Exaggerated ideas about the antiquity of certain ideas. The Vedas and so forth are pronounced to be from the beginning of the universe, all this kind of stuff. And there are modern schools of yoga that attribute this to being an ancient mystical tradition, etc. And quite often they're invented 10 years ago. It's nothing. There is no trace of it in history. It's a selling point for certain things. So when you talk about yoga, what yoga? What are we talking about here? Are we talking about spandex? I hope not. Some of the yoga postures, sun salutation and so forth, that you find in modern yoga was actually a salutation to the sun. In earlier days, it was actually people worship the sun. So they're bowing to the sun. They're worshiping the sun and the moon. And it's not a back exercise. It's like attributing the prayer posture, kneeling in prayer posture, see, or the full facial prostrations of Franciscan friars to an exercise. Like, are they doing leg exercises there? Are those prostrations that the Tibetans do? Are they leg exercises, or are they doing kind of push-ups or something? No, this is a psychological attitude towards some higher dimension of truth that you're trying to access. So this is what the misappropriation, the misunderstanding of physical yoga and so forth is. By the way, I having said all that, I like yoga. I used to do yoga, and the stretching parts are quite good, and they do affect your attitudes, your mind. By holding your breath and stretching and so forth, you change your kind of brain. So it's not that it's useless or should be discarded or anything like that, but there's a huge amount of misinformation and wacky kind of overvaluations of all kinds of things, and tracing into history stuff that is simply not historical. So when you come to yoga, don't make any presumptions. You should question the sources. What do they say? And go on a YouTube or Google or something and research the history of what the claims that these schools are making. Make sure you counteract them with some strong historical investigation, because there's all kinds of this happens in Christianity, and this happens in Judaism and Islam and everything. There's all kinds of claims that are made that just don't stand up to any kind of scrutiny. There are endless cults that have all kinds of wild claims that don't stand up to any kind of reasonable inquiry or history.
Next question is from Marcus in Santa Monica, California, United States. In one of your talks, you said that you think most people are insane, and that it was by recognizing your own insanity that you came to this view. Could you elaborate?
Yes, it's a matter of degree. So anybody short of arahant, fully enlightened, is slightly deluded. So we could, I'm using the word insane just to emphasize it, but delusional. When you go into a psych ward, the psychiatrist is writing down notes about this person, and they have delusions of grandeur, or the delusions, inferiority complexes, or they're deluded about reality. Their ideas of themselves don't match up with reality. Their ideas of what's going on. You can see this. Just vast numbers of people are involved in delusional ideas, conspiracy theories, which there's no credibility to them. You wonder why they believe it. There are particular types of extreme insanity where people need to be locked away, or the normal spectrum of people recognize that is an extreme form of non-sanity. What is sanity? Sanity is the ability to function in accord with reality, but I would say that most people are in a culture to begin with, and this culture that you're in is fundamentally a cult. We're all in cults, and it's very difficult to escape some cult or another. You have vast, just up till the 19th century or 20th century even, the West in general is part of a Christian cult, a cult of Christianity. When you look at the belief structures, what they're insisting on is quite outlandish. There's this guy called Jesus, and he is the Son of God. He is God. He is one of three aspects of God. He died. He rose from the dead. He is. You can talk to him. He will save you. You can't save yourself. He can save you, but you can't. And the whole, it's fantastic claims, which eventually came under scrutiny by other philosophies, and they said, "What? Pardon me? What are you talking about here? What sort of ideas are this?" And whatever you think, maybe you still hold those claims as valid, etc. But these are, the entire history of the planet is full of mysterious ideas, and that amount to homicidal, maniacal murder. This is not just innocent misunderstandings about things. The entire history of the world is just soaked with the most cruelty and homicide and animal side. We have beliefs. One of the beliefs is that you can indifferently kill animals. Are just machines of some sort that you can just kill for any reason you want, and you're perfectly entitled to that. And then there's some beliefs that everybody outside your group can be killed. Any human outside your group can be just killed and used and disposed of. And these are wild kind of insanity. This is insanity. So, yeah, insanity is widespread. And so, particularly when you sit down to meditate and, you attribute the world as the cause of your distress, the world around you, the situation around you. See, right now we're in this interesting, rich period of political fever. This election and that election and this party and that party and so forth. And you attribute some of your emotional distress, your despair at the situation, you're angry at the situation, all this kind of stuff. You blame it on this political situation, that political situation. But when we take you into a meditation hall where there is no political situation, we say, okay, there is no politics here. There's just an empty room. Now be at peace, because there's nobody here harassing you. Just be at peace, and you find out that there's not the political situation. It's you. You are harassing yourself. And you can't stop harassing yourself. There's nobody bothering you. There's the office politics are not there. Your boss is not ordering you around, but in your head, the boss is there ordering you around. And it turns out it's all in your head. So that's a form of insanity. And you can't stop doing it. And then, so this is a shattering realization, is that you're harassing yourself. And this changes your attitude to the world, because the world then becomes, you realize that you're letting it pull your strings. You're a puppet to the situation around you. And that it's you that's doing it. So if you stop doing that, what's your relationship to the world around you? If you decide that whatever the party that gets elected is one thing, and your feelings and your emotional well-being is another thing, what's your relationship with the world? You're now detached from the world. You're generating your own chosen emotions. And then you have to resort out everything you ever thought about how you function in the world. It's weird. You're out of prison in a sense. This is what happens. People a long time imprisoned, or even in a job, 20 years, 30 years working in a factory or something, and then you retire. Maybe you win the lottery. This happens to lottery winners. They've been working and complaining about the job and being manipulated and everything. Suddenly they got a whole bunch of money. They don't have to work anymore. The new attempt to deal with the world when you don't have to work or go to a job or make a livelihood is, you have to recompute the entire picture. It's just astonishing. And it's not always successfully done. Consciously or unconsciously, sometimes people burn through their lottery wins and end up having to go back to work. Did they do that because they couldn't handle the possibility of leisure? They couldn't handle a life where you didn't have a rigid situation or something to complain about. This happens with relationships, bad marriages, 20 years, 30. Why do they stay in them? Why do they stay in these bad marriages? And just suffering and complaining, and then somebody dies. You have nothing to complain about. Or you finally leave, and then you can't, the tension and the stress and the friction, you're not used to living without it, so you impose it on the new relationship. You try to annoy your partner so that you can have some distress back in your life. So this is the weirdness. This is insanity is just everywhere. The fact that you can go to work or have a marriage doesn't make you sane. Those who really can't do any of those things, those are extreme forms of insanity. But yes, the large population, this is what all sort of contemplative religious people are saying. They're saying, what you discover in pure deep contemplation, it's not just in the Buddhist tradition, is that there's a lot of mental proliferation of wrong ideas that are wildly out of control. And it is worth a huge amount of your life to get your mind under control and get rid of these wacky ideas that are the sign of a mind that's not well trained. So this is what I mean by this. And you will, as you meditate and go through these various stages, you will experience this. And sometimes your kind of insanity increases. You find this in all religious traditions, that people can go through stages where they were sort of normally functional, and then they kind of go into as they meditate or do more contemplation, they kind of get worse in some senses, because you're going through a stage of enormous growth. People who leave cults often report, years of this kind of discombobulation, just strange, the adaptation of that you were in a completely wrong idea of the universe that you thought was right is very, very problematic. but it's worth the journey to get out of these things. You know. Okay, let's go on.
Next question is from Prajat in India. Dear Ajahn, what does it mean to be a monk? Does one choose monkhood, or does monkhood choose one?
Both situations can occur. Did I jump in too fast there? Both situations can occur. By the way, so just the technical background here is that before we start these live streams, we remind ourselves of something. And one thing is to pause after I answer a question or before Pia asks me a question, so that we don't. The microphones have to be switched back and forth. So sometimes if I jump in, you miss the first part of the question, or Pia does. So that's what's going on in the background. So, yes, sometimes you choose to be a monk. Sometimes monk chooses to be you. It's best if monk life chooses you, but sometimes your mother makes you become a monk. My mother did not make me become a monk, but in the West, it's very rare for your parents to insist that you become a monk. But in the East, now, except if you're, say, a Catholic, say if you're a Catholic, your family, and you're the eldest son in the family, and they're devoted Catholics, there might be a lot of pressure for you to become a priest, or at least a monk. And that's not usually the best of situations, because you may not be cut out for it. And then, and you see in the Catholic world, I think that there's some grave mistakes there. People who are not cut out to be priests get, by family expectations, are put in there, and then there's no way out. It's not a temporary ordination. By the way, in Buddhism, it is a temporary ordination. It's not a lifetime vow. You don't take lifetime vows in Buddhist monastic structures. You can and are encouraged to remain in for life, but the Buddha, in his wisdom, understood that, you know, if you're not doing well, and if you're not up to this task, and you can't understand it, you should disrobe, and that it's all right. We would rather that you disrobe than be a disaster in the robes. I'm treading carefully here with the Catholic situation, where it appears that once you take that lifetime vow, and if you're not cut out for it, you can be a disaster in the collar, you know, terrible disaster. And you can't get out of it. So the Buddha set it up differently, and I think it's much wiser to say, look, it is possible to disrobe, and it's possible actually to disrobe, and then later on, when you're more ready and more mature, to come back and reordain. This is the structure the Buddha sets up, and I think it's a fantastic structure of wisdom that you must decide to stay in, and you must be capable of staying in. And if you're not, then you should leave. So, but, you know, as certain people are just, their eyes are a little bit open, and they're looking around life and the world, and they're saying, you know, we just seem to die. Some people seem to have forgotten that this is, you know, it's a one-way ticket to death, you know. What's the meaning of this situation? You'll see this somewhere around, you know, between 14 and 16. A lot of people have religious revelations or philosophical revelations. They decide they're an atheist. You know, you're 14, 15, you say, you've been going to church with your family and all this kind of stuff, and then suddenly you think, this is nonsense, you know, this I don't believe in this. So, and then what follows that? Then what do I believe in? So it's one thing to go away from something, and this is very common. We leave something, but what are you going to? And it's very unsatisfactory to just be running away from something. You know, lots of people run away from home. They run away from jobs, they run away from relationships, they run away from families, they run away from societies, which is one thing, but it's still unsatisfactory unless you're running towards something. You've got to figure out, well, what are you going towards? So that's the person has, some people are just naturally inclined this way, as kind of an awakening of wisdom and a questioning of the values, the worldly values of things, people all excited about hockey games and people, these adults just endlessly playing games. Like what it's like you're waiting for execution and you're playing games. I don't know. So this type of person, the monkhood is coming towards you. It's coming to take you away because you need to go towards some solution to this situation. You're finding yourself exiting ordinary worldly values. You're not enamored of it. You can't forget yourself in these games that people play. These light, silly games. You can't pretend. You can't forget. Now what? Well, now the options narrow. Now there's only philosophy and religion left, and so you must then make some choices amongst those types of attitudes. Some sort of wisdom structures that have attempted to solve the situation that their voice speaks to you. So you start reading these things, and then you think, that's what I think. Oh, right. And by the way, it's only a small portion of the population that feels that way. A lot of people they don't understand the problem of the situation. They don't know that it hasn't dawned on them. The situation, the big picture hasn't dawned on them. So if you happen to be one whose the big picture is dawning on you, you are starting to be marginalized. You're in the margins of the general consciousness of society, and that has to be. You can't get out of that. Once that idea dawns on you, there's no way back. You can't undo that without a brain injury. I think it might happen to some people. They get hit on the head, and then their lofty philosophical realizations are not available anymore. So they can fool around again. They can just play around. But once that dawns on you, and you don't get a stroke or a brain injury or something, then you can't unsee it. You can't unsee it, and there is no way back. And there's only one way, and it's forward into the more and more spiritual life, the philosophical life. So that's the situation. Next question. Pause. Pia.
Next question from the live stream is from No One Everyone in Iran. Dear Ajahn, when a formless being, which is purely mental processes, is born into the form realms, a physical body must arise along with the mind in the moment of birth. Considering that the exact moment preceding birth and long before that were pure mind and devoid of any physicality, how can pure mental processes provide all the necessary conditions to give rise to a physical body?
So everybody understand that? Actually, that kind of question is very, very common, and is fully explored in Abhidhamma and so forth. So this is the formless realms are very high exalted realms that are attained through this type of meditation, called the formless meditations. You're meditating on space, on consciousness, on nothingness, on least perception, on the minimalization of perception. These are called the four arupa ayatanas, or they're actually forms of jhana. I'm going to do a little sidebar here about this. People debate whether are these the sixth to the eighth, no, the fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth listings of under samadhi are these formless ayatanas, meditating on space. Just try to get your mind around that, space itself, or consciousness itself, or nothingness, or the minimalization of all perceptions, all kinds of anything that could be labeled as anything with a name. They are often called ayatanas or bases or something like that, but they're jhanas. Anyway, those are the formless realms. So you can see space is the absence of form. Consciousness has no form to it. Nothing has no form to it. There's nothing solid. There's no thing there. There's no thing there. There's no there. And the absence of perception, or the minimalization of perception, is also in the same category. So if your mind dwells on these formless, purely abstract ideas, so this is, let's go back in history a little bit. Animals don't have abstract ideas. There's meat there. There's a toy there there's a stick to grab with your teeth, and humans, well, maybe as far as I know, there is this question of whether, crabs and lobsters are doing mathematics, quadratic equations sitting on the bottom of the sea. We can't really know that for sure, but I don't think so. So, yeah, maybe oysters are the highest form of contemplative practice. They just blobs sitting there with no indifferent, I don't think so. Anyway, next we come into the human realm, where you'll see that, humans they're also able to deal with concrete things, food and clothes and shelter and toys and stuff. You see them fascinated with things. And then there's this other kind of level of the human development. It's like ideas. Ideas like removed from the thingness of things. I got to get the T-shirt, removed from the thingness of things. I don't know. This is a Greek philosophy. Of course, this is Plato's main idea is idealism. A chair is there is something called chairness, or the idea of a chair, and there's this kind of this chair, but not a chair, but chairness. And then there's all kinds of actual chairs, and each of them share some quality of this abstract idea called chairness. And Plato thought that there really is this realm where ideas, the idea actually exists apart from forms. So this is so this is similar to what we mean in this abstract, this formless realm. Maybe one of these days I'll probably do a whole video on abstract, the entrance of abstract notions into civilizations, both in Greece and in India, in a very similar time, and the similarities between Platonic abstract ideation and what the Buddha first attempted to study with the yogis. He developed these arupa jhanas, these formless meditations, which we would call abstract notions, as the way to the ultimate truth of things. And he didn't find it led to the ultimate end of things. So I'll maybe one of these days I'll explore that connection. But so he asks, if you enter this formless realm through the mind, then it lasts an incredibly long time. It's a heaven. It's the arupa heavens, and it's basically inconceivable in some ways, but at the end. But it's not the end of samsara. This is eventually the process that got you there wears out. The energy depletes, and you drop back into samsara, into the continuation of the rebirth cycle. And how can you come out of this formless state into a formed state? Good question. All they say is, it happens, dude. You got to be content with that. It's not all mysterious. It's like, does the universe arise out of nothing? Huh? Answer me that. Does the universe arise from nothing? Or is that unsatisfactory? Does the entire material universe arise out of nothing? Or from something? And if it rises from something, then is there ever a beginning to it? Does it always have to have something before something? Or can you have nothing before something? So guess what? Nobody's found the answer yet. All the astrophysicists are also humble enough to say, okay, there's the Big Bang, but we don't know. That's all we can say, is that we can see sort of convergence of things, but we don't know about for certain before that. So yeah, you got to be satisfied with that answer. Well, we've come to the end of our question and answer period live stream. Stay tuned over when the Christians are having their holidays there, called Christmas. We will be at the monastery here having a Buddha Mass. So some of you are, in the Buddhist communities, and perhaps you're a little bit alienated during the Christmas day with all the Christmassy things. Drop in on Birken's YouTube channel and make some connections on that day. We don't know exactly what we'll put up there. You got to live with uncertainty. But some sort of welcome to your spiritual community of Buddhas and Dhamma and Sangha on Buddha Mass Day. Or we like we like Christmas. It's a nice day of generosity and peace and joy and all that kind of stuff. So it's not exactly foreign to Buddhist ideas. So enjoy yourself. But we'll be back. It's a while away. It's almost 2 weeks away. So we'll. It's 10 days away. Oh, okay. I've lost track of time here. So we have another Q&A next week and on Sunday, and then there'll be that Christmas Day is on Wednesday, and we'll try to throw something up there for your communal sake. Yeah. Bye for now.